What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Vince Rashad, aka the Truth Terrorist. 2 coming at you again. Today, oh my lord, man, I really don't like to promote certain people. I don't even like to mention certain people, and I'm not gonna put her name in this video, but we all know there's a female who's basically she's the internet equivalent to Tommy Sotomayor. Now there's certain black feminists who and even pro-black chicks who be supporting this female or who have supported this female at one point in time or another. And that's the chick over at the creator of the Beyond Black and White website. But there's a racist little self-hating terminology that is used not only by her, and I go so far as to say that she wasn't the first individual black woman. It's usually black women. I've heard some black men, but it's usually some black women who are part of the pro-interracial crowd that use this term, and it's called Blackistan, Blackistan. And they use Blackistan as basically a reference toward, now let me describe it as best I can or define Blackistan from their perception, from their mental perception and definition. I'll define it as best I can. As a place created by black men who are having sex with basically a bunch of black mammies who by biological nature are attracted to men who are worthless. And these worthless men, for the purpose of creating thugs, criminals, and exploitable young black whores who they will, by the Blackistan black male-led system, they will deliberately and purposely keep this population of people poor for the purpose of having thugs, criminals, gangsters, and low income, low self-esteem, little nappy-headed women, black women to sleep with and dispose of and struggle raising their little thrown away nigger children generation after generation after generation. Now this is Blackistan. Now it's shrouded in self-hate, but it's also something that comes out of Karl Marx classism. It's just a terminology that black people with a little bit of money and a little bit of education are putting on the lesser fortunate members of our race, so to speak. But the question that we have to ask is, the American black man, did he create this so-called Blackistan? Or is the creation of Blackistan proverbial? Will black women and men proverbially just inevitably, wherever they are in the world, create a Blackistan? And is it possible that this place called Blackistan is really a place that comes out of the culturalistic mind of the black woman? Because we need not look any further than Sudan. And there are so many tragedies in the world related to black people. And there are so many things that black people can look at in this world and really get a very good understanding of themselves. But we don't look at it. I don't know if it's because of a lack of intelligence. I don't know if it's because of a lack of awareness, a lack of consciousness, because 98% of black people are not, and I emphasize, are not conscious. Or if it's just we don't have the mental and psychological complexity to actually look and see that much of what we desire, or much of what people from a social and an ideological viewpoint attempt to push forward, are literally things that exist in Black America already. One thing that exists, in not in just Black America, but they exist in somewhere in the black world already. For example, one thing that I know, even though you won't hear me talking about it that much, is that black women will engage in sexual intercourse, marriage, and the creation of children from races and from men who kill black people. And one thing is that both black man and woman have a psycho-isolationist view of one another and of themselves. But I'll talk about that in another video. But if you look, for example, as an example of what I said, when I said that black women will have sex and babies by the enemies of black people. And when black women do this, basically the people who actually hate us can essentially just pull away from us, because we will just continue a self-perpetuating cycle of literally fighting, in which you'll have black people who will be fighting against the biracial people that black women have laid down and created. The biracial people they've created from relationships with people who don't like black people. A classic example would be Sudan. Black women in Sudan, both the Pentagon and Colin Powell, back in between 2002 and 2004, recognized that there was an ethnic genocide of black people in Sudan, in both Darfur and in South Sudan, but specifically in Darfur at the time. And I've looked at a Feed the Children commercial that was specifically covering the issue of the refugees in Sudan. And they had all these black women who had all these babies by all these Arabs. And these Arabs absolutely hated black people in Sudan. And they're sitting there holding the babies and the marriage certificates and the pictures of the Arabs who got them pregnant. So black women will breed with the enemies of black people. And as that relates to Blackistan, it's this attempt to make it seem that black people, specifically black men, collectively got together one day and whispered among themselves, let's abandon black women. Let's abandon our children. Let's deliberately create a systematically poor and disenfranchised, dispossessed, impoverished black community. And that's just not the case. The fact of the matter is that as black men fought the system of white supremacy, primarily in the 50s and the 60s, and I don't want to harp again on the 50s and 60s. I don't want to be the next nigga that sits up and talks about the 50s and the 60s, but I will say this. Slavery did not end in 1866. Chattel slavery, specifically in the form of chain gangs, continued on. And then there was Jim Crow, which systematically kept black people working very, very poor jobs and living primarily an agrarian lifestyle. So black people became somewhat separated from the plantation lifestyle, but for the most part, the chain gang and the sharecropping system that came in simply replaced white supremacy, i.e. slavery, i.e. the relationship between black man and black woman and the white system never was truly separate, or it never truly separated itself after chattel slavery. Black women in some shape or way were always connected to the system of white supremacy. And after World War II, that specifically marked the time period where black society in America became the most separate and the most distant from the white system. And it only took, after the Montgomery bus boycotts began, it would only be, if you really look at it, a decade or so later before black women joined the feminist movement. So at a time where black people were at a crossroads and had the opportunity to demand more from white society and inject those resources into the black community so that black people could build black America up, black women went on the feminist rampage. And by 1967, in the spirit of Darfurian Sudanic black women, the Virginia Love case was passed. And in 1967, when the Virginia Love case was passed, just in case you're a little ignorant into what the Virginia Love Supreme Court decision was, that was the Supreme Court decision that allowed interracial marriage to become legal. So at a time where black men were fighting the enemy, black women were sleeping with the enemy. And in her very own black community. Now, I'm not talking about all black women collectively, but the black women who are responsible for forcing the policies that would push forth the black culture that we currently live in today. As part of that culture, they also implemented Roe v. Wade, child support laws, and the mass influx of abortion pills. Now, I don't have a problem, well, not abortion, but birth control pills. I don't have a problem with birth control, and in all actuality, I don't have a problem with abortion. I just believe that the man should have a say-so, and that a man should have a right to choose whether or not he wants to be a father before any child that he may make is conceived, because there are no effective forms of male birth control. But while black men were doing all this fighting, black women were basically the black women who were implementing the current day culture of Blackistan, as they called it, were putting forth the policies that would ultimately create Blackistan. Abortion is just whole support. And abortion is what you essentially implement in a society whenever you're going to say to women that you can go out there and you can, sleep with this guy and sleep with that guy and try to be, the female version of a player. If men sleep with all type of women and he gets called a player, then why can't you do it? Well, number one, a man can do that because he doesn't have a pussy to get nutted all up in by a whole bunch of different men. A woman can't do that. But if a woman is going to go out and be a hoe, then she's going to need abortion. She's going to need birth control pills, and she's going to need child support courts, because before 1968 or before the 1970s, black men had a culture of, at the point at which he got a woman pregnant, he married her and became committed to her and the children that he had by her. So to try and make it seem like that black men collectively gathered somewhere together and just said, well, let us abandon our children, is complete bullshit. If you look at the Virginia Love case, that was black women recommitting themselves, because the plantation and the white system in the 1960s became just a little bit too separate. Our black people were being called upon to do just a little bit too much for themselves and to create a society in which they were going to rely totally on themselves and build that society within this country by themselves. And that became just a little bit too much for the Negro female. So she reaffirmed her love of the white establishment by going out of her way to get the Virginia Love Supreme Court decision passed, while simultaneously implementing the black Negro, the modern day Negro female culture of abortion and birth control pills, and just sexually being a slut. Because you aren't going to get fathers. You're going to get a bastard generation that's going to be born, and then that bastard generation is going to give birth to another bastard generation. And at that point, you can't even look across the racial, or better yet, the gender aisle toward the men and ask them, why are they abandoning children in a culture, a sexualized culture that black women have made, in which you ain't got nothing but two generations of bastards who don't know nothing about manhood, and yet you're sleeping with these men. They don't know nothing about manhood. They don't look at marriages. They don't look at a man and a woman in a house. A woman is reduced down to nothing but somebody to have sex with in the minds of most of these black men, these young black men. So you can't ask, why are they not taking care of children? A man is going to take care of children when he grew up taking care of and looking at his dad handle business. When that process is broken, as it was between 1967 and 1973, you get Blackistan. So Blackistan is a creation of black feminism and black female sexual liberation. And what the creators of Blackistan are doing, now that they've culturally destroyed their very own race with abortion politics and with black female sexual liberation and independence, now that they've destroyed their own race, they're attempting to swirl this chaos and madness over into the white community. And it's not going to happen, because the white community is rapidly aging, and it is also going extinct. You know, there are 3 to 4 million more young white women between the ages of 18 and 29 than what there are black men. So a young black female attempting to go into white culture is going to run into a society that is already overran with young white girls who are already outnumbering young white boys. And also, on a side note, a few years back in Georgia, you actually had a white Christian group that stopped black boys from being targeted because they were basically targeting black boys at abortion clinics in Atlanta and other cities in Georgia for extinction. And they basically put forth a law that basically made it to where they couldn't racially and gender-wise target young black boys, even though I'm pretty sure that they're doing it, still doing it. But anyway, this concludes the video about Blackistan, who created Blackistan, and basically the origins of it, why it exists. And this is no creation of black men. We didn't gather anywhere collectively and say, let us create Blackistan. I just wanted to get that cleared up, man. It's your boy Vance Rashad, aka the Truth Terrorist 2. Holla at your YouTube.